Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and today we're going to be talking about some Gumi news. But let's first talk about Gumi laying off 80 employees after posting a net loss of $37 million. The big question that people are asking about this is EOS near? Our parent company is in trouble. What does this mean for our game? Well, maybe this is an off-the-wall take. Just entirely, but I think that this is probably, when you read between the lines, actually good for the EOS clocks for both Final Fantasy games, as they don't seem to be the problem here. They could become the problem, and that is our own conversation to have, but from the positioning of Gumi on this issue, it doesn't seem like that is the concern here. However, there are still things to be concerned with. EOS isn't the only problem that a game could have. Mass layoffs in the game industry have reached Japan. Mobile developer Gumi has decided to cut roughly 11% of its 689 employees, so they're going down to about 609. Another point that was brought up in this article: employees who accept the company's offer to resign will receive beneficial retirement packages and outplacement support. As Japan's labor law makes dismissing employees, especially on the spot like in the US, very complicated and time-consuming, what we're seeing with Gumi is a rather rare case and most likely the closest a Japanese employer can get to carrying out mass layoffs. And, that doesn't sound good at all. But let's read a little bit more into what these articles have to say. Now, I do want to get something out of the way before I start getting into the details and the positioning here. This is, as I've read it from like 4 or 5 different sources at this point, they're all either referencing each other or they're all referencing what is more likely a common press release. So, what that means is that most of the details and information that we have here are probably coming directly from the developer. There is an exception to that I will mention, and basically what I said previously wasn't mentioned by the devs as well. So, there's a couple of outsized pieces of information, but what we're going to be looking at from here, for the most part, is going to be the way the company sees this. And speaking of the way the company sees this, they're looking at it as voluntary retirement. Yeah, we'll see. And they're going to be paying 100 million yen on severance packages and other things. Now, when they were asked why they are job cutting right now, they said that it was the underperformance of their latest mobile game, Asteroid Tartarsus, which is not how that's pronounced, but I don't care, which fell far short of expectations. So a reality that I didn't realize necessarily, I got this from Cabbage Channel, so if I am utterly wrong about this, it's Cabbage's fault. It's my fault for not checking it, I guess, if I am super wrong, but I don't think I am, because Cabbage, very smart dude, and very in touch with kind of the way things are going in Japan. Games like this don't usually last very long, especially original IPs in the gacha space. Just 3 to 6 months, that's relatively good for some of these games. And there are, at least in Japan, like here in America, we don't see as many of them. And the ones that we do see tend to be more stable because, I don't know, it's, if it wasn't a stable gacha, they wouldn't have taken the risk of releasing it globally to begin with. And Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, both iterations are well outside of the norm in terms of shelf life for these games. So this is arguably more of the industry standard of how fast these games fail often. So, I mean, this isn't like a crazy example that Gumi are the worst devs ever or that they're absolutely terrible. This is just kind of how the gacha space works, and maybe a little bit more in line with what we should have expected to happen with a new gacha on a brand new IP. But that being said, I think one of the best takes that I've seen in general from the community on this topic is that the greatest mistake that the devs have made over the last year is taking that money and putting it into their own IP instead of investing in the IP that's already been making them wealthy for the last, and when you combine the run of both of these games together, the last 12 years effectively between the two games. And they've been performing consistently for you this whole time. You thought that you could do something else, you thought that you could expand, you found out that that wasn't a good idea, so now is absolutely the time that you should learn from that mistake and reinvest within the people who are actually keeping all of you within a job, at least as far as the global side of this thing goes. I know that we're not always the biggest contributors to this, but at the same time, there's a lot less work that goes into translating this over to global. I know it's a lot more complicated than just translating and copying code over into a different language, but is it that much harder? Like, you don't need the full development team to create a global version of a game that you've already basically made through your main team, right? Like, this should be a pretty easy thing for you to bring in the money on. So reinvest in the global community, for fuck's sake. And I mean, that seems like the best investment that this company not only could make in our game, but also FFB as well. And most importantly, it's the best investment they could make in sustaining their own future. After all, as I just pointed out, these not only cash cows, these have been incredibly sustainable in a space where most gachas don't even get to the point where they've been successful enough to have a global release, much less actually be successful on the global market, much less be successful on the global market for more than 4 years, much less any of them making it to 8 years. So I'm just saying, like, you've definitely got the golden goose here, so why wouldn't you put your resources into that? And especially from a lot of the War of the Visions audience, which is probably, I think, where this ecosystem is currently the healthiest, even though it's going through its problems and has been going through problems since Worldwide started to signal to the player base, rightfully or not, and there were many other decisions around this that also showed us the projection of this, essentially, but like they're deprioritizing the global version of this game in order to kind of like min-max their profits. That's how it felt to us, like we were being min-maxed, we were being squeezed. And really, again, it's such a simple product. If you could just throw a little bit of reinvestment into it, and like top down, you don't even have to necessarily invest that much into global specifically. Just quit cutting things from us. What you need to do is invest in the Japanese version of the game that we are downstream from, because all of those improvements are going to come downstream to us. That's the kind of people that you need, and that's exactly the people that you are cutting from your team right now. Instead of reassigning these people, letting them go, like that's not a reinvestment strategy. Like I get that this is all a bit more complicated than that, and you're not taking your business advice from me, but this is how we see it as a community, and that's kind of the intersection, because the consumer relationship with any of our corporate overlords is an intersection between us and you. So you have to understand our position as we have to understand yours. You have press releases. I'm just running this YouTube channel. Anyways, let's get back to the video I had intended. The thing is, this isn't clearly what Gumi expected. And I think for Gumi to have started this project over a year ago, it's an indication that at least at that time they were feeling very optimistic about the future. You could also say that at least like the global rollout of Asteroid Tartar Sauce corresponds with like the road to Worldwide and the company reshuffling its assets. They could have been reshuffling those assets over to the global version of Asteroid Tartar Sauce for all I know. And that would really suck, because if you think that War of the Visions has gotten worse since Worldwide, you should really check in on FFBE. FFBE is basically on life support at this point, which is another point that a lot of people are bringing into this, but let's keep reading, okay? Before we jump to many conclusions, let's keep reading. Gumi posted an annual net loss of 5.9 billion yen, which is $37.8 million USD. The last quarter ended on April 30th. Its operating losses doubled quarter over quarter to 13 million for that quarter, which is nuts. It means that they lost about a third of the money they did in the whole year in their final quarter, which was, at least for War of the Visions, that would have been the period of time after Road to Worldwide. Also, it would have been the period of time for FFBE where a lot of this kind of life support stuff is happening. The Japanese developer said it will revamp its development strategy. It will stop making quote-unquote risky titles based on original IP, instead focusing on games with lower budgets and projects created in partnerships with other brands. For one, that's absolutely what Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is. This specifically, like this part, but definitely this part, Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. And like, I'm not sure that War of the Visions is an especially low budget project, but it's definitely a project created in partnership with other brands. But I also want to look at this part, because Final Fantasy Brave Exvius is still going. It's coming up on its 8th anniversary, and this is like the geriatrics ward for gacha games. Like, they don't survive like this typically. Now, you know, the Final Fantasy IP has managed to sustain a lot of these, and I think maybe in part just because they have excellent console games. They have an excellent MMO out right now that just keeps releasing excellent expansions. I mean, like, Final Fantasy has become the new World of Warcraft in a lot of ways. It's not necessarily something that we talk about here with War of the Visions a lot. It's not a game I play either, because just listening to some of this MMO drama was like, oh yeah, that's why I don't play these games. They're too peoply. But I think that, you know, especially as we're seeing, well, let me describe what the life support system is for FFBE if you aren't following FFBE content creators right now. Basically, the story has pretty much stopped. New events are fairly rare. Character upgrades are becoming fewer and farther between. And new units are also just not happening on a regular basis. Like, they're not getting new units every week. In fact, I think they have a lower unit release rate than War of the Visions, which is nuts, because they've always had, you know, they've always been a game that was willing to release characters like 3 and 4 at a time. That being said, though, let me just back up a little bit and say that as much as I think that sounds bad, probably to a lot of people, personally, when I was playing FFBE, I thought the pace was too fast anyways. The story is just long as hell anyways as well. I think there's a lot of people who just straight up skipped Season 3 who might be able to go back and play it. Look, you've got more story to play, guys. Potentially. I don't know. It's been 8 years. Maybe there's aren't still people who haven't finished Season 3, no matter how they felt about it. They skipped all the story. I don't know. But, you know, it's probably not the most exciting to play a game during this, but in terms of a game that you have a large sunk cost in, the idea of the meta becoming stagnant and, you know, you being able to build up what were the best characters 6 months ago, slow build them, and they're still some of the best characters, that would be pretty cool. It depends on the state that the meta is left in. It would have to be left in a relatively balanced state, or this could get really annoying. Like, for instance, if War of the Visions went on to life support in the same way right now, it would be really fucking frustrating, because there's only about 10 characters that actually really, really matter. Everybody else is just a potential partner for them. At this point. So that would be kind of suck for us. But if there were a point where there was kind of a widely balanced meta, I mean, I can't see any downside really to having a longer time between characters and having a longer time, because this really, changes the pace of power creep and a lot of other things like that. I think that could be not necessarily the worst thing, but it would definitely save money. And I think that there's some indication here that maybe that is a priority for them. Like, I don't know if a game like that would still bring in the same level of money. Maybe they're going for, they're trying to get some retirement income out of it. I mean, it is an old man at this point, FFBE. So, maybe they're putting it into retirement and just drawing a retirement income from it. But also, it may not cost them a lot of money to keep this game stabilized. And maybe that's more efficient for them. I don't know what. I'm just reading off of 7 words here, so whatever. According to Gumi, the changes are necessary to ensure sustainable growth for the company. It's had a lot of issues over the last year or so and has gone through several rounds of layoffs. Looking at their Wikipedia, I think it was, they were also characterized for having a lot of rounds of layoffs early in their IP, even before they launched either of the Final Fantasy Brave Exviuses. So this is kind of a thing for the company. And I think, like, for us Americans, it's like, what? They did layoffs. Okay. We do layoffs all the fucking time. We are savage. Most of you have probably been a part of a layoff. You have been laid off here in America, which is just kind of an indication of how big of a problem that is. And, again, reading about this voluntary retirement packages and, instead of doing layoffs, they're sending them out the door with huge severance and only the ones that choose to go. It's like, wow, we need that here in America. If you learn nothing else from this video, it's that we need to be pushing for that legislation because it sounds fucking cool. And then finally, and this is one of the only, like, outside pieces of information, there were a couple, though, and I don't actually want to look at this guy's Twitter profile. Like, I just don't want to go on Twitter today. But we already got this piece of information here. And we already know about this stuff. It's actually the last part of this tweet that I think is interesting. No. Among other things, Gumi recorded $18 million impairment loss on a game that flopped in app stores. So this is almost certainly Asteroid Tartar Sauce. Asteroid Tartar Sauce cost them $18 million over the last year. And this is good and bad in that this does explain where, like, roughly half of the money that they lost over the last year went. Where did the other half go? I mean, if they are hemorrhaging money that fast from things that aren't Asteroid Tartar Sauce, then that could be a pretty significant issue. Although I think they've maybe adjusted, some of the way that they're developing the FFBE games to make them more cost efficient. A, putting FFBE in low power mode. B, Road to Worldwide. C, cutting all the language support for the global version. There is a question of where it will end, though, and this is a little bit scary. Like, is this going to be... Are we going to be seeing War of the Visions put on low power mode? In service of making it maybe a leaner machine that's hopefully more profitable for them? Are we going to see... I don't know. Are we going to... There's another thing that could happen here, though. It's very unlikely in that they're laying off 80 people, but since they're also essentially laying off Tartar Sauce Asteroid as a game, then that could mean that if there were more than 80 people working on that project, and looking at the company and the number and scale of its projects, there could have been more than 80 people working on this one, especially early on. Then some of those people could get reallocated to the projects that we care about. We could also see more budget being reallocated to projects that we care about. This could be potentially, this could get some of those games out of low power mode. Perhaps they were saying to themselves, and perhaps they're realizing that this is a bit of an issue that they need to solve with these games, that they actually need to prioritize them. That being said, I doubt it. That's just, I don't necessarily expect that is their motivation here. Instead, I think it's probably more likely that it goes in the other direction, that both games go into a low power mode. And again, with War of the Visions, I'm actually kind of into that. That would give me, as a free-to-play, way more time to build out my roster and catch up and all those things. And I'm just not necessarily mad at that. Like, I would be happy continuing to play this game in various states, even if it were in low power mode. As long as we get to finish off, like, the story beat that we're on, like, I want to see what happens with the Realm Scourge. I want Gilgamesh's story to get wrapped up, all of that kind of stuff. Like, that was the main story. It's taken several seasons to play out this huge epic story. I at least want to see that through. Come on now. Now, it's a shame I won't be able to see that through in English, but we've already made a video about that, and I've got plenty of layoff related footage from that one. It's just a bunch of glorious puns that I hopefully are making you laugh during this video, because this is some harsher stuff. So, really getting a lot of extra information there. So this was from the FFBE subreddit. Okay, well, where's this? Oh shit. Damn. So back in 2021, they were worth almost 1,000 yen per share. I'm not really seeing any more peaks like that. Dropping down to about 600, 700 during their low points in 2022. Oh wow, they actually, so late 2022, they actually moved to their highest number, just over 1,000 yen. They actually hit this number over 1,000 yen multiple times. And then oh god, that stock price just fucking fell off the face of the map. Part of this would be so there's a lot of things happening within this time frame, within this huge drop. There's Return to Worldwide, or Road to Worldwide. There is the moving FFBE into low power mode. There is also Asteroid Tartar Sauce, like just a bunch of poorly received decisions and poorly received products that they put a lot of focus on. Wow. Yeah. There was really nothing else to come out of me reading the Reddit for that one, except for that link to their stock prices, which stock prices are a graph of rich people's feelings. It tells you something, but how valuable that information is only directly proportional to how much you care about rich people's feelings. Now, those rich people, i.e. investors, are certainly looking very hard at the company's financials, so we can kind of think of this as having a correlation with the financial health of the company, but I would rather take my notes from, but again, the stock market is a graph of rich people's feelings. That is the point that I'm trying to make here. So with all that being talked to death, to the point where no one on fucking Reddit even had anything to add to the conversation besides mistaken opinions. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Gumi Economics. I know this series can be a lot more dry than the rest of it, and it doesn't really teach you how to be better at playing video games, but nevertheless, I appreciate you tuning in. And, remember that the free-to-play option for YouTube is to like and subscribe. Also, leave me delicious, delicious comments for me to chew up and spit out to the algorithm so I can feed it like I'm baby birding it, just vomiting your comments back into its mouth for more views. Gross. But in addition to that, I have a link in the description where you can support the channel by sending donations, checking out my other online ways of communicating with the world, my main channel, my Spotify account, all of those things. You can subscribe, you can like, you can do all those things there. There's also ways to support the channel monetarily, either with a one-time donation or recurring donations. If you want to send like $1 a month, that is greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps. But also, I am a fiction writer. I do write books. Specifically, if you're watching this type of content, maybe you'd be interested in a book that was based on a tabletop campaign that I played in a game that I designed myself. And then I kind of recorded the experiences of my players playing through it and novelized it. I thought that was pretty cool. That book is called Athena's Chosen. And the follow-up to it was also written in the same way. So, interesting set of stories if you're into this type of stuff. But with all that being said, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.